The Pacific Theater was home to arguably the most brutal, most intense fighting of World War II. Its origins can be traced back to the 1931 Japanese invasion of Manchuria, when Japan got its violently expansionist policy across to the international community through the Imperial Army's dehumanizing treatment of its new subjects. Japan soon spread its iron grip into China and French Indochina in the coming years. In response to the surge of Japanese expansionism, American President Franklin D. Roosevelt worked with other Western powers including Britain, Australia, and the Dutch government in exile to exact an oil embargo against Japan. And so it all began on December 8, 1941, the Day of Infamy. The Japanese combined Imperial fleet struck Pearl Harbor and ravaged the fleet stationed there, crippling many and sinking some warships including the USS Arizona. Following the attack, the United States of America declared war on Japan, and the Pacific Front was now open. General Nimitz, MacArthur, and Stilwell were at the American helm, while General Tojo and his legion of subordinates held Japan's. In the early battles of the Pacific, Americans soon learned that this was a new war. The Japanese combined fleet and army used unconventional tactics and yielded a string of consecutive victories that pushed the Allied forces back. In one case, the Japanese Navy even launched an air raid on an Australian city, killing over 200 civilians. The final Japanese push was made at the Battle of Midway, where codebreakers again, as well as a Japanese tactical blunder, turned the tide of the battle. This major Japanese defeat marked the turning point of the war in the Pacific. By now, American commanders created an appropriate plan to retake Japanese-controlled territories. The plan was called island hopping. It involved invading and retaking key Pacific islands, leaving the more heavily defended island fortresses to starve of supply deprivation after encircling them. This also allowed for the retaking of critical airstrips lost during the initial Japanese victories. The Japanese wouldn't give up these islands without a fight, however, and it was during this that the most intense fighting took place. In one case, the fight for the island of Okinawa grew so intense that 1 out of every 3 Americans that landed there were either killed or wounded. Finally, the fall of Okinawa and Iwo Jima, as well as the development of the new B-29 Superfortress bomber, allowed Americans to take the fight to the Japanese mainland. Daily bombing raids were made on critical manufacturing cities and shipyards, as well as the capital city of Tokyo. Despite this, the Japanese policy of death before surrender still hung in the minds of the Imperial Army and Navy. They would fight until their dying breath and force an American invasion of the Japanese islands, an invasion which was projected to generate at least another million casualties. This outcome seemed inevitable until newly sworn-in President Truman gave the order to drop the world's first operational nuclear fission bomb on Hiroshima, Japan in the early morning of August 9, 1945. Despite the absolute destruction and the Soviet invasion of Japanese-held Manchuria under Commander Vasilevsky, Japan held firm under its crumbling foundations. But after the second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki the next day, and along with the impending threat of the Soviet invasion of the Japanese Hokkaido region, Emperor Hirohito decided that he had had enough. Imperial Japan surrendered on August 14th, and an official surrender was signed on September 2nd. World War II, the world's bloodiest war in which over 70 million people were killed, over 13 million in the Pacific Theater alone, finally ended. In the aftermath, the Pacific Front of World War II had its consequences. It led to the continuation of the Chinese Civil War that resulted in the victory of communism, resulted in the gradual decolonization of European claims in Asia, and ultimately led to the fall of the Japanese Empire.